whenever you're ready.
Be sure and tell us what the guys want for the production area is for you to say who you are, spell your name.
All right.
And you were the first president of
Okay.
Central College, and what you do, and that
All right.
kind of thing.
Okay, fine. All right, you ready to go?
Yep.
All right. I am Donald T. Rippey, that's spelled R-I-P-P-E-Y, and I was the first president of El Centro College, and I left El Centro after 10 years. 1976, I left the Dallas district and El Centro College and moved here to Austin, Texas, where I became a professor as a colleague of John Roosh, teaching in the Department of Education and Administration, but teaching primarily in the community college leadership program. So that take care of the stuff, all right?
Very good.
Okay.
What we want from you is kind of just reminisce,
All right.
do your thing, say
Okay.
whatever. There's no time limit,
All right.
okay?
Am I speaking to you, or is just a monologue? Just a monologue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, it doesn't seem possible that it could be 25 years since the district was organized. My first introduction to the district was talking with Al Phillips in the state of Washington, because Al and I were both working in that state. And Al had been contacted by Dr. Priest, who had been named the chancellor of the district. But I believe at that point no one had been employed in the district other than Dr. Priest. And Al called me and wanted to know if I'd have any interest in joining Dr. Priest and him in Dallas. And I told him yes, I'd have an interest in that, and what should I do. And so he told me a little bit about the process, and eventually I talked to Dr. Priest on the telephone. And that, again, was as close as I got to Dallas before I actually had been employed. And so then I came into Dallas and discovered that Dr. Priest was there, and 2 or 3 other people had been employed in the old Rio Grande National Bank building, which has since been demolished. And so we stayed in that building while we essentially divided up the work. Pretty much Dr. Priest and Dr. Phillips worked on the technical occupational programs, along with finding a place, a location to have the college. And Carol Zion, who had been employed really as an administrator, decided, and she and I agreed, that she'd be a good vice president, or deans as titles at that time, of instruction. So she and I were working on trying to get the curriculum together and hiring faculty for the first year. So that was my introduction really to the district. We started on that and went through lots of catalogs and talked about curriculum, and pretty much put together the first year's offerings. And then we convinced Dr. Priest and Dr. Phillips with modifications of what would go the first year, and then we hired against that list. So most of the people in the district, many of whom are still there, were employed against that first list, so that we felt we were going to have 2,000 students. We ended up, of course, with about 4, and so it was a good thing we could hire part-time instructors, or we wouldn't have been able to cover all the sections. But as it turned out, the first round of approximately 100 faculty members and administrators that were hired the first year were hired against our estimation of the number of sections we'd have in those various curriculum areas. And that's how we launched El Centro. And of course it grew from there up to about, I think, close to 7,000, about the time that then Eastfield and Mountain View were opened the same year. And of course that dropped our enrollment, because many students who, since there was only one community college in the whole Dallas County, they came to El Centro. But once those 2 opened, then it was closer for many of them, and many of them preferred it because they didn't have to pay to park, which was always one of those cause celebs at El Centro, because not only did faculty and administrators have to pay to park, but so did the students. So we lost students then and dropped at that point, and that was maybe one of the first crises at El Centro, because budget was tied to enrollment. So we not only lost students and faculty, we lost dollars. So we worked to try to gain back the enrollment that we were losing to the two new colleges, and in a large measure managed to stabilize it and did grow it back somewhat. And at that time it was interesting because Dr. LaCroix then had been named president at Eastfield, and I've forgotten the man's name from the public school.
Douglas.
Yes, Dr. Douglas was named president at Mountain View. So then the issue was, all right, well, where are people going to work? And so that was one of the first sort of probably major decision points in the district, because many people wanted to be promoted and were worthy of promotion, probably more worthy than there were positions to be promoted to. But many of them applied for promotions at one of those two colleges, and so there was a fair amount of turnover in people at that time. And so a lot of the people that are still at Eastfield, a few at Mountain View and others that have gone to other colleges, that was the first migration out of El Centro. And since we had lost enrollment, it was also good for the district and good for the faculty members, because instead of losing a job because we didn't have enough students, they could transfer to one of these other colleges. And I think that's a real advantage always of a multi-college district, because you can spread the risk around a bit. And so if you have a drop in enrollment at one, you may not at others. And that, I think, helped make the Dallas district a good place to work. It also did provide a good many new administrative positions for those faculty members that wanted to move into administration. Many of them had that opportunity. So I guess as I view it, you know, El Centro weathered a few crises, the one over losing the students and the budget, and then kind of recouping and regaining that, another over losing a lot of good faculty members. Many of them were promoted, and they just preferred to transfer. So we hired back against, as we gradually increased our students, we hired more people back. So I think we, you know, essentially had a pretty stable population. Students, as I think about the students, they changed a lot. The first year we opened, I was surprised because almost all of them were right out of high school. And they were, I would say, fairly, at least middle or upper middle income students. They also had pretty high ACT scores, which we did collect. And it was quite a different college the first year from what it was, say, 3 or 4 years later. By that time, particularly after the two new colleges opened, many of those students then did not come down to El Centro. So we had an increasing number of minority students. We had a lower academic quality student. And so there was quite a shift in students, which meant it was tougher in many ways for faculty members to keep up with that. And so that was another one of those periods of times that I think El Centro had to try to work through to do a good job of maintaining quality instruction for the students, when the students were going to require more time to learn their academic work. And we increased our, what we called then, I think first it was guided studies, but it was in effect compensatory, remedial, developmental, whatever label you want to put on it. It was work that was really below college level, and the students needed to accomplish at that level to be able to take our regular college courses. And so we increased the number of faculty members teaching in that area, and probably at that point in time had the largest developmental program in the United States, because a lot of colleges had not yet had a change in their student body and they hadn't shifted over. Or if they did, they just let the students drop out. So that was an interesting time, I think, when we increased the size there a lot. Gwen, my wife, believes that one of the reasons that a lot of people really did talk about El Centro as it being Camelot was that everybody had what they wanted. And as I've done some studies since I've been at the university, one of the best definitions, at least the one I like the best, about morale is that morale is the variance between what one expects to get from a job and what one gets on the job. So if I expect a certain level of salary, or I expect a certain level of health benefits, or a certain attitude on the part of my boss. All of those expectations are played out against reality. And then if my perception of what those things are meets pretty well, there's not much variance between my expectation and what I'm receiving, then I feel really good. My morale is high. And so I think Gwen probably has a point. There was a time in there for some, majority maybe, or maybe even most of the people working at El Centro, what they expected on the job, they pretty much got on the job. And as a result, they felt good about it, felt good about their job, and certainly I felt that way. It was an exciting professional time for me. And I think even today I am struck with things that are now considered to be new and different and innovative and exciting are things that in fact were tried at El Centro back in the 60s and early 70s. And so it makes me feel good that many of the things that we tried, some of which failed at El Centro, and they may work now at another location, but the concept and the idea was tried, and I think a lot of the things that we did worked pretty well. So I'm about to run out. How much longer do you want this to go on?
It's real flexible. You know,
a lot of it we're going to keep also for archives,
Okay.
as I told you before.
Right.
We were going to organize our archives.
Right.
And you being our first president, I want to make sure that we have plenty.
Okay. All right.
Rippey.
Okay.
Anything else
Well, I could go chronologically a little bit more if you want to.
Because I think you covered, like you said,
Mostly the beginnings.
our expectations.
Yeah, right.
We had everything we wanted.
Yeah, right.
And I told Lee, you know, that, like book budget
Yeah,
and
right.
the best LRC.
Sure.
And we have people from all
Right.
over the world coming in to
You bet.
see
Look
our
at us. Right.
automated library. Remember?
That's, oh yeah, absolutely. First one that I know of, yeah. Yeah, we had lots.
would you do it again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have no regrets at all. It was a great professional experience. Not many people get to actually start a college from scratch to begin with, and then two, to do it in a district like Dallas where there was enough financial resources. Being the first one, we had first shot at those resources, and I enjoyed very much working with Dr. Priest. He's an excellent administrator. Always had a good, solid board. They understood what it took to make a big operation run, and they didn't quarrel over little things like telephone bills and things that some boards never have used to dealing with big organizations have terrible time with. And Dr. Priest, of course, was highly respected by the board, and that helps because they would quite often just accept his word for things without having to have a lot of elaboration around it, which made it much easier to start something. So from my perspective, it really was just a great professional experience, and I would love to do it again. It was a lot of fun. And the time and energy that everybody spent, I think, they all felt pretty good about. The other elements that I guess that came into play is that I think Don Creamer was a very innovative person when it came to student development kinds of activities. Carol Zion, I've never known anyone who could spit out ideas as fast as Carol could. And we had a chancellor and a board who had said at a board meeting publicly that they wanted this first college to be an innovative college. And Dr. Priest mentioned to the board, and they said, yeah, we understand that. And that is that when you do something that hasn't been done before, which is one definition of innovation, there's a high risk for failure. And as I said, a lot of the things we tried didn't work. But Dr. Priest got the endorsement of the board that if we were going to be innovative, we were going to have a lot of failures. And we'd do our best to make them go, but that's what you find out when you try something different and new. And we did. We tried out a lot of different things, and I think that it allowed people like Carol Zion and other people who were very creative and innovative in the faculty to be able to do things and try things that they never would have had a chance to do in another location or in a different setting or a different even economic climate. And they got a chance to try them, like our mini college and other things that were costly but probably very effective. But we had a chance to try it and see what it took and see what worked and what didn't work. And I think, you know, as a faculty member now, I would see that as a great advantage. I wish I had that chance at the University of Texas. But there's too many restrictions around what I can do to try things new. And that, I think that helped morale and helped faculty find it an exciting place to be. And we did. We tried a lot of those different things at that time. Student development, I think, was a concept that still has a lot of merit. It's never been really worked out. We didn't have time at El Centro while Don Creamer and I were both there to really promote that, but I still think it has a lot of advantages to it. Pieces of it are being used, I think, different places. So there were just a lot of really kind of exciting, new and innovative things that went on there. And as people heard about those, I think one person did a research study at Florida State University and came up with the fact that somewhere in the period, say from the start of El Centro, which was I guess 66, from 1966 to about 1970, there was not one book written on community colleges that didn't mention El Centro College. And as a result, people read about us. There was lots of presentations made by our faculty and others at different conferences and meetings around the country. We began to get a tremendous volume of people coming to look at El Centro. And I still find that today, and I'm sure many of the faculty members do around, that we're at El Centro. Even today, you find people at a conference, you start to talk to them, and they say, oh, you're from El Centro? Well, you know, I visited you one time. And so it's kind of fun to meet people. You know, here it is 25 years later, and you still bump into people that say, oh yes, I visited El Centro. We wanted to see about something, and it would be one of those things that we tried and were doing at El Centro. And they came there to see how it was going from somebody that was actually doing what they were thinking about. So that's always fun. Another thing that's satisfying to me, and I'm sure it would be and is for many faculty members who also have the same experience, I have bumped into people all over the country that graduated from El Centro. And it's amazing how many of those people stayed in education. A lot of them have finished master's degrees, few with doctor's degrees that I've run into. Said, hey, college course. I even get a note from somebody that says, I went to El Centro just one.
While we're talking,
Right.
I want to honestly tell you how much I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be part of the community college and the community college movement and part of the Dallas County Community College District. And I'm very happy where I am.
Yeah, that's
Thanks
great.
To you.
Well, that's great.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I was curious as to, we've talked about the last 25 years, and how do you perceive
The future.
The future,
Right.
the next 25?
Right. Well, one thing, of course, when you get as old as I am, you have a more biased view, I think, of the world because you got more experience. And generally, it's our experiences that bias us. We think the world, the next 25 years is going to be like the world was in the last 25 years. And yet we know, intellectually, we know that's not true. It's going to be quite different. We just don't know how it's going to be different. I'm sure that part of this is my own bias. But based on what I see happening today, it seems to me that we're in for not 25 years, hopefully, but a few more years. That might mean, say, the next 5 years. It seems to me we're going to have some fairly difficult financial times unless we figure out some way to do a better job of collecting taxes and spreading the way that we collect revenue from people and organizations. We're going to have a tough time to fund all of the things that people desire. It doesn't matter whether it's a prison or a highway or a college. You're competing for the same dollar. And so you got public school costs, and my understanding is that you look down the road in about 10 years, you're going to have an increase all the way along on public school, more babies being born. That's starting to occur now. So while we are now having fewer, and at least ostensibly we're supposed to be having lower education costs at the public school level, we've had also more problems around equity problems. Like we're not spending the same amount of money on Hispanics or blacks as we are on whites, wealthy districts versus poor districts. And one of these days, they're going to finally figure out a formula to balance or equalize that. But it's probably going to cost more money. And so everything I see in the next, 3 to 5 years makes me think it's going to be a little tougher economically. The other thing that I think in that same period of time is we're going to have to come to grips with, some of the issues that are like single-member districts, for example, has some real benefits, but it also has some real drawbacks. It tends to get people to look at the world smaller, not as broad or as large a view. You look at what my people need in this part of the city, and then that plays out in a board, for example, of trustees. And I think it's going to take a little time for people to get accustomed to the fact that while they may represent a certain segment of the city in a single-member district, they really are not elected to that board to just represent that small segment. They're there to do the best they can for everybody in that city, and I think it's going to take a little while for that kind of education to come around. And I think in the next 3 to 5 years, there are going to be some harder times around getting an understanding on the part of board members compared to the last 25, maybe, of elected boards, particularly with single-member districts, which I know is going to be true in Dallas, and probably everywhere. And so I think that there's going to be some times that are going to be more difficult from an administrative point of view. They may not be any more difficult from a faculty member's point of view, except that where you've got, well, like the LRC and books and libraries and other kinds of laboratory equipment, those are all going to be a little tougher to come by because of budget. But as far as servicing the clients, the students, teaching in the classroom with students, I don't see that that's going to be any more difficult. I think there's going to be an incredible amount of change in technology. I think it's going to, we know what it's done the last 25 years. It's probably going to double or triple that in the next 25 years. So I think we'll have to work hard and fast just to stay up with technology. And that's going to affect us in all different ways, in the classroom as well as administratively, and as well as particularly our technical occupation programs, trying to keep up with what's going to be needed to make us, as they say now, world competitively in our the numbers of people that work in business and industry. Are they going to be well trained? Are they going to be up to date on technology? As they say, world-class kind of competitive workforce. And that, I think, will be difficult. I think the next 25 years, it'll be exciting because there's going to be a lot of new things in this world and a lot of new inventions. It's going to be a very exciting kind of time, I think, to be alive. And I get the impression, too, that the next 25 years we're not going to have near so much problem with world peace. That isn't to say we aren't going to have a lot of problems about people living together, working together, and so on. But I think the big problem of the Soviet Union versus the United States around atomic war, that is going to pretty much disappear. And as a result, I think, we can put both money and time and attention on problems that have been real problems for us to solve, like jobs for everybody, and high enough standard of living, and getting rid of welfare, and all those kind of things. I have one little bias that I think we're going to have to do. I think that not only the technology is going to move fast, we're going to have to work hard to keep up, we're going to have more tax dollars, and that's going to be hard to come by because there's going to be more competition for them. I also think that some of the systems that we use now to deliver services, and I include education in that, are going to have to make some major changes of how we do that. I think we've come to the end of the time when people get served for health services at this place They get served for if their house is broken into or they commit a crime, they get served by criminal justice in that part. They get served for if they lose a job, then they get served with food stamps or some kind of reimbursement for a time in some other location. If they need training, then they go to a school in another location. If they are a single parent and they're having trouble and they got to have help for their children, then they go somewhere else. I don't think people can keep up with that. Plus, it's very inefficient. So I see the time in the next 25 years when we build some systems, and I think education will be a major player in that. There are some people doing it now and feel that the community college ought to be the major player. I'm not quite willing to go that far, but I'm willing to think we ought to give some thought to maybe building a kind of a one-stop shopping center where we deal with social services in the broad sense, and we have representatives of all of these agencies that work together and talk together around a client's needs, as opposed to it's up to the client to try to find it. If he can find it and get help for one thing, somewhere else for another thing, somewhere else for another. And I think that's going to be a kind of an exciting time too. So I guess I'm optimistic about the future, except in the short run, I think we've got some real problems we're going to have to work through, particularly around money and keeping up with technology. But I think in the long run, we'll solve those and maybe get some new systems, as maybe that'd be part of the solution, that will be more exciting and more efficient and raise the standard of living for everybody. And I think community college is going to play a pretty major role in that.
Okay, about 3 minutes left.
I just want to thank you.
Okay.
I want to be on camera
All right.
with my president.
Right. Thank you. Okay.
Can we? And I want some photos. if you
All
don't
right.
mind.
Sure. No problem.